Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sami Haj Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners.
Greetings to everyone. If this is the first time you're listening to our podcast, thank you for trying something new. I will reiterate, Ben and I are a pair of automotive journalists, but more important than that, we're really good friends. Right, Ben?
Sammy, did you know that 2 weeks from now the sun will start setting at 7 p.m.?
Yes, I do know that.
That's getting me through the day.
Ramadan starts soon, or has started, so
yeah.
We're well aware of when the sun sets nowadays.
I believe it starts tomorrow as we're recording this.
As of record, and yesterday as of release.
Yes, there you go. Ramadan is the center of it's the axis upon which we pivot this podcast.
Ben, I wanted to give you an opportunity to plug all the recent publications you've been writing for. Can you do that for me, please?
Sure, you can find my work at Haggerty, at Motor Trend, and at Capital One Auto Navigator.
Perfect. That's my friendly duty. Done. I can be mean to you all episode now.
When are you not mean to me?
Oh, that's not true. Would you like to hear some of the publications I write for, Ben?
I mean, I guess. Do I have a choice?
You might not, actually. You can find my work at autotrader.ca, driving.ca, and Capital One's Auto Navigator. Ben, we've got some SUVs to talk about today.
Yeah, surprise, surprise, everybody.
Yeah,
although we did have a really good run of cars.
Yes.
Which is nice.
And we've got some more cars coming up.
Do we?
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Eventually.
I'm glad to hear that.
But what are you talking? You've got a car that we haven't spoken about in over 2 years?
More than that, I think. 3 years now.
Wow.
And it's even more important. Well, I don't know if important is the word, but interesting to talk about now because for 2025, it's been redesigned. And that is the Subaru Forester, Sammy.
The Subaru Forester is a car that can be, in my opinion, can be recommended without any particular reason as to why.
What are you saying?
That I can just point, if somebody's struggling, if somebody turned up to me and said, I want a Toyota RAV4 like vehicle, but not a Toyota RAV4.
Such a specific way of framing that question.
Have you checked out a Subaru Forester? And they'd have a Forester the next day.
I guess that's true. It's when I often recommend Hyundai and Kia products to people who there's a lot of people who just don't care about cars, and that's fine. And
I struggle recommending those. I'll explain that in a minute, but go ahead, keep going.
I like recommending them because they're generally reliable. But the other reason is they're stylish and the technology is good and the price is good. So I have those reasons, right? Where I'm this is why I'm comfortable saying get an Elantra or get a Sonata or get a Palisade kind of deal.
Okay.
With the Forester, to use your logic, I guess it's kind of true where I would say...
Finally, he's using my logic.
Like, you should get a Forester because... And I think and this is what... a revelation I had after spending a full week with it. I think you should get a Forester because it is essentially a bigger Crosstrek. It is the step up. If you have a Crosstrek and your family's getting bigger and you want something larger, a Forester gives you almost exactly the same experience. And that's both good and bad. Okay. And exactly the same experience in a plus size package.
I mean, that's the case that I'm getting with almost all of Subaru's SUVs, maybe with the exception of the Ascent, which actually feels a little bit like different and maybe not as good as some of the other cars that they make.
I don't think the Crosstrek and the Outback are similar at all.
You really don't think so? I see so much personality shared between them, especially because of their exterior design. Really makes me think about those.
Maybe visually, but just the driving experience. Everyone who listens to the show knows that we lease a Crosstrek, and it's great basic transportation. It does everything it needs to do. The fuel mileage is decent, and the price is right. I feel like the Outback goes above and beyond that, and I'm sure the wilderness version or wilderness version of the Crosstrek is out there too. So there are ways to add more personality to it. But the Forester, I don't feel has the same kind of identity as the Outback. Yeah. I feel like the Forester, as it stands now, is Subaru's most generic SUV. And I don't think that was always the case. And we can talk a little bit about that evolution. But
let's talk about that.
Well, so back in the day, way back in the 90s, I think it was the 90s when the Forester first appeared. Am I wrong? Is it early 2000s? It was much more... So Subaru didn't really make any SUVs. They had the Outback, which had become a crossover SUV and created that segment. But in terms of traditional SUVs, they weren't selling anything like that in North America. And then enter the Forester, which, unlike the Outback, was not really a wagon. I mean, you would look at it today and say, I can kind of see the long roof element of it, but it was much more upright. It had a lot of 90-degree angles, and it stood apart on its own. It had its own personality. Subaru was also in that era fond of giving the Forester high performance versions. Like right from the start, you could get turbocharged versions of the vehicle, initially only in the Japanese market, but then they came over to North America where you had the Forester XT. And the Forester XT was turbo, it was fun, it was relatively nimble. That kind of evolved around, I want to say 2011, when the Forester got bigger. The XT model stayed, but it was given a CVT instead of the manual transmission or the 4-speed automatic that had been available in the past. And that it was still performance oriented. Like they put in all these virtual gear ratios and stuff to try to keep you engaged. But it was more, it was starting to walk the line between premium and performance, where the turbocharged engine was something you paid more for to get more rather than something you paid more for to have fun with. And we're at the stage now where the XT version of the Forester no longer exists.
That's right.
It's been a little while, too, that it's been gone. And Subaru has...
I think a whole generation has been missing, right?
Yeah. And Subaru has focused the turbocharged... they have a turbocharged engine in the Ascent, but it's there because the Ascent is big and it needs power. So if you're looking for something that has a little bit of a kick when you want to have fun in an SUV that has a Subaru badge, you can really only get it in the Outback.
Right.
I want to say that while I was driving this car and writing my review for a client and thinking about all this stuff, I kind of came to the realization that the Forester's evolution is kind of mimicking, or not mimicking, but mirroring the decline of STI at Subaru.
Okay.
Where we've seen STI go from being the most exciting badge and the most desirable badge that you could get with a Subaru. In the Japanese market, it was available on far more vehicles than came here.
Yeah.
But we had,
and even today, the STI badge is now like watered down into this TS thing tuned by STI, which people don't like understand at all, and doesn't provide the same emphasis on performance that STI used to, right?
And even harsher than that is the fact that there's no longer a WRX STI. Like it's gone. And we had that for so long as the apex of Subaru performance. And so all of this kind of comes to a head when you look at Subaru's marketing today and realize that Wilderness has pretty much replaced STI as the most important badge in the Subaru lineup. It's available on every SUV they make except for the Ascent.
Yep.
It has... And because of that, we don't have, maybe not because of that, but as a result, there's no need for like a Forester XT. Subaru's not interested in that performance anymore. They're going to make a Forester Wilderness. They're going to make an Outback Wilderness. They're going to make even the entry-level Crosstrek has a Wilderness trim. So that's where we are now. We've completely reoriented ourselves away from performance on the street, or wherever you want to call where you'd have fun with your turbo SUV. And now it's about not glamping, but overlanding and exploration and that kind of thing. So let's get back to the Forester that I drove.
Yeah. Let's talk about the bare bones. What you're talking about with a Forester is a compact crossover that, as I mentioned, competes with the likes of the RAV4, but also Honda CR-V, Hyundai Tucson, and let's throw in a Jeep Compass in there, maybe?
Oof, Jeep Compass. Let's not talk about the Compass.
Why not? I mean, I think that it's important
Mazda
to talk
CX-50, I think, is in there.
Sure. I wanted to bring up the Jeep only because Subaru comes standard all-wheel drive. I think it comes with a reputation for being somewhat confident on trails or off-road settings. And I think you could say, I think the Jeep product also tries to incorporate that same personality,
but
right?
It doesn't come standard with four-wheel drive, the Compass.
Yeah, I think that's wild. I think that's just the silly thing. Someone can get a front-wheel drive Jeep.
Kind of tying together what I was saying earlier about the absence of XT for Forester. I think that the Forester competes with some versions of all the vehicles you just talked about, and that's because the Forester is a single drivetrain vehicle. That's wild, right? It is. You can get it's a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder. It gives you 180 horsepower and 178 pound-feet of torque. Now, those are econo car numbers, Sammy.
Yeah, but I mean, the CRV I think is I would say the CRV is also one powertrain.
I
Is that
thought there was a
possible?
1.5 liter turbo you could get.
I thought that's all. Oh yeah, there's a hybrid as well.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
But
Go
how
ahead.
much torque does that turbo have? 200 something?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
Or 190.
This is the problem that the Forester is facing, where almost every single option out there that's competitive offers a turbocharged motor in some form.
179 actually on that.
On the turbocharged
On the
engine?
turbocharged Honda CRV.
Okay.
Not very good. Okay.
But there are, excluding the CRV, I mean, I think the torque for the CRV hybrid is like 267 or something.
247.
247, yeah.
Which is very good.
That's considerably higher than, that's like 70 pound-feet more than you'd find in the Forester. And that's, I think that's a problem for Subaru. In a sense, I think that it's a conscious decision. But what's kind of happened is the Forester went from a vehicle that had a wider lineup of choices to one that is one specific type of vehicle that offers you different levels of equipment rather than a different experience behind the wheel. And with the exception of wilderness, which is where all the focus is now. So like instead of trying to compete with like the CX-50 turbo, which I think has 250 pound-feet of torque as well, you know, instead of trying to give you that type of quote unquote premium drivetrain, instead Subaru just said, the engine is what it is. If you want to go off-road, we have a version that kind of does that, and everything else is just going to be equipment related. And now, that's a for a company like Subaru that probably doesn't have a ton of development cash, I think that position makes sense, but I also think it kind of hurts this vehicle.
I totally hear what you're saying. I will point out that the automaker has also announced a hybrid model coming. I think it was revealed earlier this month at the Chicago Auto Show.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out what its performance figures are because I doubt that it's anything interesting. Combined output is 194 horsepower, which is 14 horsepower over the other one.
Wow.
Which is like non-noticeable. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And why I think the reason why we're getting a hybrid version of the Forester that fails to use that technology for performance is because Subaru has long had issues with fuel economy. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why every vehicle that they make has a CVT on the order sheet somewhere, because it's one of the ways they've been able to kind of stay competitive with other car companies that don't offer standard all-wheel drive, right? They can't advertise that front-wheel drive high number as a loss leader to get people into the showroom. I saw 10 liters per 100 kilometers while I was driving.
Good.
Yeah,
not good.
It was very cold. But that's like 20.
I have a 15-year-old Outback with a 2.5 liter motor, just like yours, with 170 horsepower or whatever, and a manual transmission that's getting about 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So like I got it. That's, to me, I think it's about 24 miles per gallon, which is not horrible. But it's not, you know, you look at that and it's not very competitive when you're talking about some of the crazy numbers we've seen from other crossovers. But
24 mpg. Do you know how hard you'd have to be driving a CRV or a RAV4 to get 24 miles per
gallon? Or you
gallon?
could just drive a CX-50 hybrid normally.
Yes.
Yeah. So when Subaru brings in a hybrid drivetrain for the Forester, it's 100% for gas mileage.
Yes.
And that's going to be their ability to say, to upsell people and say, pay a little more and you're going to get a lot more frugality. You know.
But they're also going to be encouraging people who want a Forester now to wait till next year. I don't know if that's not a great mindset to put people in.
I will say that the 4-cylinder engine that's in the Forester, it's okay. Like, it's fine. It's not all that noisy or thrashy. It's just, it doesn't give you anything special. You know, like
it's nothing. It's just it's a powertrain.
Again,
it's a
larger
right? Like
cross-trek.
It just it does what it's supposed to do, and you'll never have to think about. You'll never worry about what that motor is, whether that motor is achieving the job it's set it to do, which is motivate this SUV, right?
Exactly. And so, you know, on the look side, they've kind of made the Forester chunkier this year on the side. Like, it has more.
How could they make it chunkier? Because it is a box. It's a box.
But if you look
wheels.
at the 2024 version, there were a lot of curves and stuff. and those have mostly disappeared. The fender flares are much more pronounced in terms of their angles. And up front, what I noticed the most is it looks like a Ford. Like it looks like an old Expedition or something.
It does, and I think the rear end looks like an Explorer or a What's the other car that it kind of looks like? It's kind of old Mitsubishi Outlander, maybe?
It's a little strange. So the styling is somewhat derivative, but it's not unpleasing. Like it's totally fine. And then you go inside, and I think they've done a decent job of making the interior more interesting to look at. There's still a lot of plastic, but I think it's an upgrade over the model. I had a limited model, which is like one down from the top. In Canada, the limited, let me check the pricing here. It's the Forester starts at $33,500. The limited starts at $43,000. In the US, the pricing is a little bit different. The limited is $36,000 US, whereas the base version of the Forester is just under 30. It's actually pretty much $30,000.
Okay.
So this is
that's a pretty good price range in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a more expensive. You can get a touring model. I think basically you're getting leather. That's in the States. The limited also has leather, but the touring, as I mentioned before, this is the Subaru is giving you more equipment. It's not changing the experience of the vehicle. For 2025, there doesn't seem to be a wilderness model currently available. So
no, they just announced it again, I think, for 2026.
Yeah, it's going to be arriving, and that will be their quote-unquote flagship version of the vehicle. Maybe they'll put a turbo in that. Who knows? I mean, they might have
so far, it doesn't look like it. It looks like they're just doing the same thing as always, which is changing the final drive ratio.
Okay.
To make it a little bit more, I think, from what I understand, more responsive. I think in the like off the throttle, like immediately on throttle, and then I think that's to help it on some uphill segments as well. We'll have to see whether or not that's true. All of the wilderness appointments seem to be the same across the Subaru lineup. They all get like the same kind of hike. They all get the same kind of tires, which I believe are Yokohama Geolanders.
Yeah.
And they all get like a beefed up roof rack, which I think is made for overlanding. It can support like 700 pounds or something, which I think is plenty for camping up there.
Yeah. And the biggest change that you'll notice if you park them side by side, you would see that the 25 and the 24 do look fairly different. Mm-hmm. The larger change, though, which you don't need to be inside to notice, is the fact that the Forester finally gets that giant 11-inch vertical touchscreen.
Yeah,
that was absent in the previous generation. They had kind of the horizontal screen that was complemented by, on the dash, you had the little tiny information screen as well. Mm-hmm. And the new 11-inch screen, it takes that dash top screen and kind of scrunches it onto the top of the real estate. Like the information you would see there is now found at the top of the larger screen that does everything.
It's like a sequence of widgets that I have this on my car. You have the 2 screen setup in your Crosstrek?
Yeah, because we have the base model.
And I think that in many cases that's actually pretty
good
because
that's a different 2 screen setup than the one I'm referring to. Because that's the 2 screen where you have the older Forester had a screen at the top of the dash, whereas the Crosstrek had the one where it's a screen and then there's another screen directly below it on the center stack.
Right. Go ahead. Yeah.
So
and what do you think of this?
It's not great. It's not bad. You lose a lot of the buttons that you had in the previous Forester. There's stuff that you can touch, like dials and buttons for turning the heat on and off, or not on and off, but colder and warmer, and tuning the radio and tuning the volume. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to be doing anything more than that with the climate control, you have to either kind of focus on the small buttons at the bottom of the infotainment screen, or open up the climate control larger and then deal with what can honestly feel a bit overwhelming in terms of the options that you have. It's distracting from while you're driving.
Is it slow? Because I have in my newer Outback, I find that little, like, if I want to change the HVAC settings with a little bit more control, and you have to open up a climate control screen, that actually takes like what feels like a second and a half or 2 seconds to like show up, and you're like, is everything okay with my poor Outback? Like, is it doing what it's supposed to do? They might have one of the slowest infotainment systems on the market.
We'll talk about the slowest infotainment system on the market next week when we revisit a vehicle that you hate.
Well, do you hate it now too because you've driven it?
I have some things to say about it.
Okay, good. I love that you threw me under the bus. You hate it. I
You do
can't
hate
wait
it.
to talk to you
You
about.
do hate
I
it.
didn't hate it. I hated the same thing you didn't hate.
You didn't
I
hate
didn't
it.
like
You just hated having to drive it.
exactly because you have. Okay, sorry. We're talking specifically about the Volvo EX30,
Which is a vehicle that cannot get out of its own way to being good.
Okay,
That's
good.
the problem.
That's all we needed to say.
Yeah.
Now, this infotainment system in the Subaru, though, it's functional, but it's slow.
Yes.
But
I don't have any problems with the infotainment system. I just think it could be better.
yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I've appreciated, though, is when I bought a used 2020 Outback, and when I first got it, my major like nitpick with it was that when I used Android Auto, it only used half of that screen, the top half of that screen. But since then, actually within the year I bought it, it got updated and has a full screen Android Auto setup. And I found that to be unbelievably, I think that was really customer friendly to have an update that gave you more functionality. And I was really impressed with that. I thought that was really cool.
What I don't like about it is there's still that weather widget that I don't need, that I can't get rid of.
Yeah.
It's like bottom left screen. It's useless. Please get rid of it, Subaru.
Oh, on the full screen Android Auto? Yeah, it's trash.
It doesn't need to be there.
And then sometimes it gets replaced with like something like your friend messaged you on WhatsApp. What do you want to do about it? I'm like, I don't know, nothing. Get rid of that.
Show me the weather again that I hate.
Yeah.
Other things about the Forester, it's pretty much the same size as it used to be inside, which is good. Decent rear seat room. That's impressive. The interior cargo space, like behind the back seat, it's fine. I think it's like 26 or something cubic feet. It's 2,155 liters, if you're curious about that. If you fold the seats down, I believe it's around 76 cubic feet, which is okay. It's not enormous, but I
think that's plenty.
It's definitely very usable. That's
got to be among the best in the class.
I think you're like right up with like RAV4 and CRV at that point.
I think CRV is massive. I think it's got to be up there with the CRV. Actually, I was looking at the CRV. Where is that now?
So
never mind.
The Forester's it's like I said, bigger Crosstrek. It is a vehicle that does a job, and that job is driving you around, and you can put a bunch of stuff in it and drive your stuff around too, so you don't feel lonely. Like if you if you leave your house in the morning and your stuff's still in your house and you feel lonely because you can't be with your stuff, just put it in the Forester and it's going to come with you. I had the vehicle during the cleanup of a very big snowstorm that we had. We got 74 centimeters of snow in 4 days. I think that's like 3 feet, maybe 4 feet of snow in a very short period of time. And so there were a lot of snowbanks. There was a lot of, because of the snowbanks blowing snow, we had high winds. So it just takes the snow off the top of the snowbank and just erases your visibility.
Yeah.
And the roads were constantly covered with either slush or, in the case of my dirt roads, just more snow because they don't salt those roads. So I had a chance to really sample the Forester in a nasty environment. It was interesting driving it back to back with the Outback. There's a downhill right-hand corner coming to my house. Mm-hmm. And in the Outback, it's very easy to get lift-off oversteer. If you come down that corner and just kind of take your foot off the gas, the rear end will come out and slide. In the Forester, it doesn't do it. It's much more stable.
Interesting.
The wheelbase is a little shorter, and the overall length is a little shorter. And I think that plays into weight distribution on the vehicle. There's less of a fulcrum. It doesn't want to swing out as much. I just found it to be a more stable. I'm not saying the Outback was unstable, but the Forester feels more planted. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated the ride height too. It has the 8.7 inches that every Subaru has. There are some people in my neighborhood who feel like the whole road belongs to them because we're on some back road and no one else is out there, according to their worldview. And I came around a corner and there was a full-size pickup truck in the middle of the road barreling at me. I had to take the unplowed shoulder. And when I say unplowed, I'm talking 5 feet of snowbank. Yeah. I went into the snowbank at about 40 miles an hour, had the truck pass me, and then pulled out of the snowbank again. No problem from the Forester. It totally handled it. I didn't get high-sided. It didn't suck me into the snowbank. It just let me skirt the edge of it. There was some poofs of snow that went up in the air, and then I was okay. And the Forester, the platform has apparently seen some chassis tweaks. It has a new power steering rack. It's the same one roughly that you'll find in the WRX, the electric steering rack. But apart from that, the engine is the same. The tuning is relatively the same from what I understand. So it is it's not a refresh. It's essentially a new generation of the vehicle, but it's kind of the same as what you had before from a functionality perspective. It does everything that you want it to do. It doesn't do anything unexpected. It's not an exciting vehicle. It just is. And like Sammy said, I think I can recommend it. I mean, it's an appliance, but it's a good appliance.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing because I struggle to pinpoint exactly what it is that makes it worth buying over the competition. It's not design. Its design is totally fine. It's not the interior. There are ones that are with prettier interiors. It's definitely not the technology because that infotainment system's a bit slow. And it's not the motor because it's not fast and it's not that fuel efficient. But something about the feeling of driving it and having all of that on in one package is really confidence inspiring. It really feels like this is normal. This is a normal feeling car, and I can just rely on this to take me through, especially wintry weather. It's easy to recommend in that sense, and I think a lot of people are looking forward to that. I will also say, and I think you'll agree with me in terms of you've owned a couple of Subarus. You have two in your garage right now, and I've got two as well. And I found them reliability wise to be really. They ask nothing from you except for routine maintenance,
and maybe a head gasket.
I haven't had that issue. Mine aren't that old, or that high performance. But I've dealt with people who've had Tucsons, or actually in particular Tucsons, and some Mazdas who have required a lot more many more visits to the dealership for nagging issues and serious issues that I could not have dealt with in my own cars. So that's one of the main reasons I kind of there's way too much reliability history of on the Korean cars that make me have a difficult time recommending what I assume is going to be a long-lasting daily commuter for a family or a person.
All right. Well, moving on, Sammy, you drove a very, very different SUV.
Yes,
and
I
one
did.
that we haven't talked about in, I think, 5 years.
Is it true?
4 or 5 years, yeah.
The car we're talking about, the one that I drove for a similar wintry experience, was the 2025 Lincoln Aviator. The last time we drove it, the Aviator was a totally different vehicle, not in terms of like platform and powertrain, but
wasn't like a plug-in hybrid twin turbo?
Actually, that is the main problem that I'm having. The new Aviator is pretty good, but when you look at it outside of just itself, there's a lot to complain about. Let me just get the basics out of the way. It's a 3-row crossover. It's pretty high end. I drove what is known as the Reserve model, which is just under $70,000. It offers a hands-free driving system called Blue Cruise, which worked actually pretty well for me until my grill got covered with snow.
I'm a little surprised that Lincoln hasn't renamed Blue Cruise for Lincoln.
Yeah,
like Star Cruise or something? Because isn't the logo a star?
For a Lincoln?
Yeah, I thought it was a star.
It's a cross. I don't know what you call it.
A star cross.
A star cross. Okay.
Like a Star Fox, but cross.
It's an attractive looking vehicle. It is. It's very good. My vehicle had all sorts of. I mean, I took it out to cottage country. As we talked about last week, we went to the middle of nowhere with this thing, and I really appreciate it because it was nice and cozy. It had massage seats. It had this Blue Cruise system that worked on the highway really nicely. It was easy to drive, easy to load up with all of my stuff. And I would have no problem saying that this is a good vehicle. Until I recall that the last one that I drove had a plug-in powertrain with more power, with more torque, with zero emission driving. And then I remember that the newest Lincolns, 2025 Lincolns, the Nautilus and the Navigator, both come with massive 48-inch digital screens, infotainment systems that the Aviator does not have.
So you're saying they skipped the middle?
They skipped this car.
The entry level has it, and the top tier has it.
Yeah,
but the Aviator doesn't.
That's right. Well, there's actually something lower than the Nautilus called the Corsair.
Okay,
but
do you think it's because the Aviator is too close to the Explorer?
Yeah. I think definitely. I think it's and you'll recall that when I drove the Explorer ST, there was something about it that I found really easy to live with. It's one of those vehicles that I didn't mind jumping into, going on a trip with. It had plenty of performance, it had plenty of space, it looked good, it had good visibility, all the technology I wanted. But now I'm looking at this Aviator saying the same thing for, a good chunk more money. And I'm wondering, what are we missing here on the Lincoln lineup? And yeah, we're missing this massive touchscreen that's found on the other Lincolns. We're missing the plug-in hybrid system that was found in the previous model. And I can't help but think, like, Lincoln made a little bit of an oopsie with these decisions, because otherwise they've got a great little 3-row on their hands.
Okay,
here.
so let's remove it from the context of what the Aviator was before. Compare it to what people would be cross shopping it with. Do you think it still stays competitive?
Barely, okay? Because sorry, I didn't mean that to sound combative, but
it didn't sound combative. I don't work for Lincoln. I'm okay with
no opinion. To you when I went like, okay, you hear me? Okay. Look at some of the other luxury 3-row vehicles in the market that I think could play at the same segment as the Aviator, and you're looking at something like a Volvo XC90, which is available with a plug-in hybrid system. We're looking at the Lexus TX, which is available with a hybrid system, and I think those are two very important competitors for Lincoln. And
price-wise as well as market position?
Both. Everything fits in here.
Okay.
Other vehicles that is definitely better than, obviously, Infiniti QX60.
Wow.
Needs to be forgotten about. And then another one that hasn't been changed a lot, but I think you found very good, is the Cadillac XT6.
Yes, I fell in love with the old school character, but that vehicle is apparently gone. Very soon.
What do you mean by gone?
I read that Cadillac is getting rid of XT5, XT4, and XT6 and moving exclusively to battery platforms for those vehicles.
Wow.
I don't know if
that's wild.
Confirmed, but it would be relatively soon. And it would be, I think the XT6 is a single generation vehicle. So yeah, that might be part of it.
That's wild. Okay. But I would have thought that I probably thought, I'll have to recheck my notes, but the plug-in hybrid version of the Aviator was one of my favorites. I thought it was really well. It performed just as good as the one that I'm talking about here. Had all the same features, was easy to live with, but had that extra element of a plug-in hybrid powertrain, which is what put it above the rest of the class.
Now, are there any other plug-in hybrid Fords right now?
Plug-in hybrid Fords, just the Escape, and then there's a Corsair version of it as well, I believe.
So they've do you think they've backed away from that technology? I don't think the F-150 hybrid is a plug-in.
No, it's not.
So there was a time when you could get, in addition to that Escape, you could get the Fusion that had a plug-in hybrid.
Yep.
I think they had some of the, not the transit vans, but the smaller van that they used to offer had
the Transit Connect?
Yeah, I think maybe the Transit Connect was a plug-in hybrid, if memory serves.
No, it wasn't that. It was the C-Max.
C-Max, that's right. Sorry, I got them confused. And now most of those vehicles are gone. As you pointed out, there's two, and they're the same one. So that might be a reason.
One with all-wheel drive and one with front-wheel drive. That's the major difference between the Corsair and the Escape.
Ford might have just they made a big investment, or a somewhat big investment, in battery operated vehicles. And those came out as the F-150 and the Mustang Mach-E, and since then we haven't really seen anything.
Right? And I think you're following a really good thread, because there was supposed to be a battery electric version of the Explorer, if I recall correctly.
I think you're right. I don't think it was an Explorer. I think it was a 3-row that was separate from the Explorer.
Okay,
but I know what you're talking about. Yes,
a battery electric Explorer, like, okay,
yes. Yeah, kind of like. Yeah, okay, go on.
And then I think
Explorer.
Yeah. And I think
the E-Explorer. E-Explorer.
No, they're gonna do it the Mustang Mach Big.
You
or
just
something.
Gotta put as many hyphens as you can in the name.
I think that would have made sense for a Lincoln product as well, a 3-row battery electric.
Perhaps even more sense.
Yes. And I think the plans on that vehicle have fallen through, or that's more of a European product
So
now.
you're saying
There's something
we're not going to get an
something's
we're
not
not going
right.
to we're not going to get an Aviator?
An EVA, that would be very good. I think that would be brilliant. I don't know what the plans are, but I think we were supposed to have gotten um, a battery product by now, and we didn't. And I think they've pushed out this attractive but seemingly less competitive version of the Aviator out. And as much as I liked it, I just couldn't help but think that the last time I drove an Aviator, I was more impressed. And the last time I saw another Lincoln product, I had more of a feeling of wow, they're on the up and up right now.
But you would still recommend this?
As long as you don't look at the 48 inches of screen space on the other cars,
How
or
much screen space do you actually
I need all of it, man.
Is this not a positive? Like, I'm kind of coming around to the idea, like, what I liked about the XT6 was the analog, quote unquote, feel about it.
You know, I used to have a Mercedes that had like a dial pad on
listen
it.
to Mr. Mercedes here. I used
That
to
had a
have
dial pad on the,
I had a
on the
dial pad.
stereo system.
I could
and
call
think you'd love
Dr.
that.
Benz, and he would. Sorry, go on.
And I think you would love that.
Do you remember when Volvo had that dial pad on like the
Yeah.
they had that on so many vehicles. I think that's in case you were getting a fax from Sweden. I don't know what I was going to use that for. It was like the BlackBerry of dash displays.
There's so many things that are like that, I think, that are like flash in a pan designs that they didn't go anywhere with.
Yeah.
And I think Volvo was at the forefront of a lot of them. Like I like the one that had like a passenger on the look of a passenger in a seat on the gauge cluster, or I mean not the gauge cluster, on the sensor stack, and you would just press where you want the air to flow to, and it'd be like, yeah, I get it.
It was like,
That's it.
there's got to be a better way to do this. You know?
Yes, as opposed to what we're used to, which is a button that cycles through all of the various
A simple
settings.
LED icon that can alter its shape and position.
But no, I mean, I would be comfortable telling somebody that this is a pretty good high end 3-row, but I still think that something like the Lexus TX is a bit better. I do like the Volvo EX90, but I think the latest version has some infotainment concerns. And
Don't say.
yes, and that's like Volvo's like subtitle now. Like Volvo, our infotainment kind of sucks now. Like,
What about, and you haven't mentioned this vehicle, I'm a little surprised, the MDX from Acura. Is that
MDX
because it doesn't
feels-
really have a third row?
no, it has a third row. It has as much of a third row.
As a TX?
Yeah, no, more. It has less of a third row than a TX.
That's what I was thinking.
But there's something about the MDX that just doesn't like hit me correctly. I think the most interesting version they make is the Type S, and even that one isn't very interesting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's almost like the Type S should be the base
Yeah.
if they really wanted to grab attention.
And again, we've talked about the MDX because there was a point in time when the MDX, the sport hybrid model, was like among the best in the
It was
the
really
industry.
cool. I liked it.
And it was really cool, looked good, had plenty of space, was a good price, all of that stuff meshed together for like there was this moment when Acura was kind of on top of the world with its class. And I felt like Lincoln kind of had this with the Aviator before it cut all these features out. And I think that now this Aviator has been contracted and is a little bit more mainstream and is a little less special. as a
Where
result.
is this Aviator in its life cycle?
I believe this is a mid-cycle refresh.
Okay, so it's not going to be replaced anytime soon.
I would say probably not for another 2 years or so. And then maybe that's when this battery electric thing will show up. But I will say that in general, it's a very good vehicle. It does everything it's supposed to. There's one small thing I apparently learned after I returned it. I parked in a snowbank and broke a mudguard when pulling out, which is the opposite experience you had with your Subaru Forester of going into a snowbank and having no issues with that. So if it seems to have a fragile front air dam or mudguard there, which is embarrassing. I should have paid more attention, but
I'm sure it
I
has
would have
less
imagined.
I'm sure it has less ground clearance than the Forester. Like
I also
everything on the
imagine
market.
that. I can't believe that happened to me. I was so embarrassed when they told me that.
It's totally fine. I don't even know why you're talking about it. Now everyone knows.
That's okay. I have to disclose how awful I am.
editing this out.
No, don't. It's okay. Yeah. I do want to talk about. Although I'm done talking about the Aviator, do you have any more questions about it?
No, I think you've set me straight.
I want to tell you that I got a message from a listener talking about the Toyota Crown Signia that we drove recently.
Hey now.
And they said, as a previous owner of a Venza, the Crown Signia really appeals to me, and that they're looking to buy one really soon.
Isn't this exactly what we had said what you said the Crown Signia was? It was like a direct replacement for the Venza, but like better.
I love well, I thought it was more about for the like current generation, the Venza that was currently just discontinued.
But that's way cheaper, right? Like we're talking about the Camry based Venza that was really good.
The one, when did that Venza go out of production? I want to know.
A while ago. I want to say like 10 years maybe.
Because I think that's so funny, because if somebody had bought a mid generation of that Venza, Toyota Camry based Venza, and now they're looking to replace it. That's the normal life cycle of a Toyota product. But I mean, 15 years, 25 years.
That's the life cycle of every car that's out there. The average age is like 12 years now or something like that. So the car companies are up again. You could theoretically buy a car and then miss out on one or two generations of it, and then go back to the dealership to get a new car. And you're so far away from where you started. It's not the same thing where like unless you're leasing. You're not in the same cadence as a car company releasing its products, I think.
But yes, it is a reminder that we were kind of on top of things when we described the Crown Signia as a Venza-like, but just a little bit more expensive.
Speaking of reminders, could you remind people about how they can get in touch with us if they want to tell us their own Venza stories? Because I'm always down for a Venza story.
Just hit us up on our website. Go to unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. You go to the contact form there. You fill that out, and all your comments and stories land in our inbox. Or you can reach out to us via email. It's benjamin@benjaminhunting.com. Or you can find us on social media. I think we're most likely to be found on Blue Sky.
No, I'm kind of off Blue Sky for now. I'm just taking a break from a lot of social media, except for Instagram. I'm still using Instagram.
Just find us on Instagram at Hunting Benjamin for Ben there, and at Sami_ha, like you're laughing.
Sammy?
Yes?
If people want to subscribe, they can do that at the website too, unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. Clickety-click, there's buttons, you subscribe, everything's good. Or just go on your favorite podcatcher, and you'll find us unidentified automotive podcast. Unnamed Automotive Podcast. We are everywhere, all over the internets. If you could leave a review or just say something about the podcast or shout us out, that's always a big help. Sammy, what are you going to be talking about next week?
Oh my God, I don't want to talk about this. I'm driving a 2025 Ram 1500 Rebel.
Why do you not want to talk about it?
It has been the bane of my life this week. It has been so annoying. It doesn't fit in my garage. I have to move it every time my wife needs to go anywhere. It's so big. It's got these massive wing mirrors, but man, it is so cool. We took it to play in the snow, and it's an enjoyable car. So I can't wait to tell you all about my experience. It's my first taste of the Hurricane engine powered Ram 1500. So I can't wait to talk to you about that.
Pretty good engine. I'm going to be talking about the previously mentioned EX30, and I had some issues and am continuing to have some issues with some aspects of this vehicle, which we will explore in depth.
I can't wait to talk to you about it, because I was so frustrated with this car. I could not believe that this made it out the door when I drove it.
It is astonishing.
Now I'm realizing what you've told me about your experience puts my experience to shame.
And you know what I mean? I'm in contact with Volvo about it, and I am waiting to see if maybe there's something that can be done to fix the problems that I'm having. They've been very, very responsive to my questions, but we're still waiting for a solution.
Okay, perfect. I can't wait to hear about it, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.